Zier stood at the observation window of the cloaked Drade warship Superior Mind, his 4 eyes blinking in staggered disbelief. Below, the blue-green planet seemed deceptively tranquil, if you ignored the sporadic bursts of primitive warfare lighting up its surface. Unbelievable, he muttered to himself, mandibles clicking in amusement, still relying on chemical propellants to launch metal projectiles. How charming. His ocular enhancers zoomed in on a military base in what the humans called North America. The sight of wheeled vehicles and jet aircraft nearly made him laugh aloud. Enjoying the view, Senior Tactical Officer? The resonant voice of Commander Year made Zaketh Thor stiffen, his dorsal spines rising instinctively. The commander's iridescent carapace shimmered in the soft blue light of the ship's interior as she glided toward him. My apologies, Commander, Zaketh responded, performing the traditional gesture of respect by crossing his secondary arms, while keeping his primary limbs still. I was merely observing their military capabilities. The amusement in his voice was unmistakable. Would you care to hear my analysis? Year tilted her head, her antenna twitching with curiosity. They're still in their technological infancy, Commander. Their most advanced weapon systems rely on radar technology, which we perfected centuries ago. Their communications are dangerously vulnerable to our quantum disruptors, and their armor— he gestured toward a line of tanks moving through a desert. They're still using basic metallic alloys. Not a photon-deflective shield in sight. Commander Isla's mandibles curved into a grin, a gesture of amusement in their species. The High Command's decision to classify them as a Type 2 civilization was overly generous, she remarked, activating a holographic map of Earth's military installations. Their nuclear capabilities are the only significant concern, but our planetary shield network will neutralize them instantly. Zaketh examined the deployment plans that hovered in front of them. The invasion force seems excessive for a species that hasn't even mastered basic gravitational manipulation. It's standard protocol, Year replied, narrowing her secondary eyes. Though I share your opinion, the Drade Empire has conquered far more advanced civilizations than this one. She dismissed Earth with a wave of her limb. Their most sophisticated AI could be mistaken for a maintenance drone. At least it will be entertaining. Just then, another officer, Krex, joined them, his battle armor gleaming in the light. Did you know they still engage in something called hand-to-hand combat? They actually touch each other during battle. His horrified amusement triggered a ripple of chittering laughter across the bridge. Primitive or not, Commander Year's voice cut through the laughter, commanding attention. We proceed with the operation at dawn. The major population centers will be our primary targets. Zier, you will lead the ground assault on their largest military installation. It will be my pleasure, Commander. Zier's mandibles clicked with eager anticipation, though I doubt I'll need anything more than a standard pulse rifle. These humans and their projectile weapons. Zier trailed off with a dismissive snort. Little did they know, as they hovered high above Earth in their advanced warship, their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating humanity's weaponry. It was underestimating humanity itself. The quantum pulse spread silently across Earth's atmosphere like a wave of thunder, unseen but powerful. Across military bases worldwide, screens went blank, missiles lost their guidance, fighter jets became useless, and even the simplest gadgets, like the smart toaster, stopped working properly. At remote Base Echo, nestled in the mountains that most people conveniently forgot about, Lieutenant Jessica Chun was in the middle of a morning PT session with her unit when every electronic device suddenly malfunctioned. Well, that's new, she muttered as her fitness tracker spiraled into digital chaos. She heard the distant sounds of helicopters struggling to make emergency landings. Her radio crackled once, then went dead, accompanied by what almost sounded like an apologetic whimper. Above Earth, the Drade command crew was celebrating their apparent victory. Well, as much as a species of militaristic insectoids could, mostly involving synchronized mandible clicking and formal exchanges of tactical superiority. Phase 1 complete. Exceeded expectations, Krex announced, his carapace glowing with pride. Their primitive electromagnetic devices didn't even register our quantum disruptors. It's like watching a carbon-based life form bring a stick to a plasma battle. Commander Year's antenna twitched in satisfaction. Launch the drop pods. Let's show these humans what real warfare looks like. Zaketh, preparing his assault team, added with a grin, perhaps we should document this for the military academy. How to conquer a pre-space civilization in 3 easy steps. His comment was met with chittering laughter echoing through the deployment bay. Back at Base Echo, Chun was already adapting. 10 years of Marine training had taught her that when technology fails, humans excel. Watching her soldiers instinctively fall into defensive formations without the need for communication, she called out, "Listen up. Whatever knocked out our tech is isn't from this planet. We're going old school. Rodriguez, get the bolt-action rifles from the museum display. Thompson, grab every bow in the rec room. Johnson, I hope your weird medieval warfare hobby pays off today. Her soldiers moved swiftly, relying on their training as the first Dray drop pods entered the atmosphere, trailing green flames behind them. Chun smiled as she saw Private Johnson practically skip toward the armory, eager to grab his collection of personally forged swords. Mom, Sergeant Wu called out, pointing skyward. They're landing at every major military base but ours. Chen's grin turned fierce, her eyes narrowing. Let's give them a welcome they won't forget. Guess they didn't think a remote training base was worth their time. Their mistake, Lieutenant Chen muttered, watching the situation unfold. The first wave of Drade ground forces landed at Fort Bradley, expecting to find the humans disoriented and panicked without their technology. Instead, they were greeted with an unsettling stillness. Zakith, leading the charge, felt an uneasy sensation crawl over him. He ordered his troops forward. They're probably hiding in their bunkers, paralyzed by fear. A young Drade soldier, fresh from the academy, quickly activated his sensor suite. Sir, I'm detecting no electronic signatures. No communication, no active weaponry, no vehicles. It's like they've regressed to the Stone Age. The Drade advanced cautiously, their anti-gravity units humming softly. Their sleek, advanced armor glinted in the early sunlight, a display of their technological superiority. They carried weapons capable of leveling entire cities, backed by systems that could track even the smallest target from orbit. Above, Commander Year monitored the situation with satisfaction. Multiple successful landings confirmed. As anticipated, no resistance. Without their technology, they're utterly powerless. But back at Base Echo, Lieutenant Chun was proving that humanity was anything but powerless. She surveyed her troops, Marines armed with compound bows, combat knives, and an assortment of historically significant weapons. The irony wasn't lost on her. Remember, folks, she said, dusting chalk from the improvised communication board, the more advanced a civilization gets, the harder they fall when you take their toys away. We're Marines. We adapt. We overcome. She hefted a crossbow, testing its weight. Today, we're going to teach these aliens about the last 5,000 years of human warfare at once. The first indication something was terribly wrong came when squad leader Vexel lost contact with his reconnaissance team. One moment, they were reporting all clear. The next, there was nothing. No static, no crackle of interference, just complete silence. The kind that only follows death. Impossible, Vexel muttered under his breath. Their weapons are disabled. The answer came swiftly, a perfectly aimed arrow piercing the joint between helmet and thorax plate of his second-in-command. The Drade soldier fell without a sound, green blood staining the earth beneath. Projectile weapons, Vexel shrieked in disbelief. They're using, he didn't finish the thought. A log trap, simple yet deadly, crushed 3 of his soldiers as it fell. The humans had somehow rigged the entire forest with ancient mechanical traps. No electronics, no sensors, just cold, calculated physics. Around the world, similar scenes unfolded. In the dense jungles of Vietnam, a squad of Drade troops found their advanced technology useless against guerrilla fighters who had honed their craft for generations. The humans covered themselves in mud and foliage, camouflaging their heat signatures to blend perfectly with the jungle, a tactic the Drade could not comprehend or counter. How do they keep vanishing? A frustrated Drade commander growled, just moments before another victim was claimed by a hidden bamboo spike trap. In the Scottish Highlands, the aliens learned a painful lesson about the human knack for creating improvised explosives. Their armor, built to withstand plasma bolts and advanced energy weapons, was surprisingly vulnerable to the mix of fertilizer and diesel fuel. The resulting explosion sent shards of alien technology scattering across the heather. They're making weapons from their refuse, a horrified soldier reported to high command. Every human home is an arsenal. Urban warfare proved even worse. In the narrow streets of Rome, Drade forces found themselves fighting an enemy that understood a concept they didn't. Cities aren't just battlegrounds, they are weapons in themselves. Centuries-old cobblestones became projectiles, narrow alleys were transformed into death zones, and every window could be the hiding place of a sniper armed with a compound bow. From the shattered remains of Fort Bradley, Zakith, coordinating the operation, received increasingly panicked communications from his field units. Sir, the humans are attacking with sharpened metal bars. They're using something called piano wire to trap our movements. They've weaponized their pets. The dogs. They're tracking us, but it was the psychological warfare that truly began to break the Drade's will. It turned out that humans had mastered terror long before they mastered technology. Under the cover of darkness, human soldiers would sneak close to Drade encampments and whisper through the night. Drade auditory sensors, designed for battlefield communications, were hypersensitive to certain frequencies, capabilities, and the humans exploited this weakness with ruthless precision, using war cries and even bagpipes. The noise, one soldier screamed, frantically clawing at his audio sensors. Their weaponizing sound, a particularly unsettling report, came from an elite unit stationed in Mongolia. The humans had reverted to ancient horseback tactics, appearing from nowhere, striking with primitive weapons, and vanishing back into the vast steppes. The unit commander was nearly incoherent, the officer recounted. They're faster without vehicles. How are they faster without vehicles? And their four-legged mounts, they don't register as threats in our targeting systems. The breaking point for many Dread soldiers came during close combat. We evolved beyond physical combat millennia ago, relying on advanced weaponry, one officer said. But these humans, they've preserved and perfected hand-to-hand combat into an array of terrifying styles. A security recording from a fallen base showed a human woman, barely half the size of a Dread soldier, using a martial art called jiu-jitsu to disarm an armored warrior. The footage became infamous among the Dread forces, especially the part where she cheerfully explained to her dying opponent that the laws of leverage don't care about technological advancement. In his command center, Zier watched as another tactical display went dark. "How?" he muttered, his voice filled with disbelief, his gaze fixed on the screens. "How are they doing this? We disabled their weapons," Zier exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice. His intelligence officer, still nursing a bandage from a recent run-in with a human weapon known as a slingshot, hesitated before responding. "Sir, initial analysis indicates we may have made a critical misjudgment. We assumed their strength lay in their technology, but it seems their technology was actually a hindrance. By disabling it, we've forced them to fight in ways we didn't expect, ways our systems have no data on. Ancient methods, tactics they've honed for millennia, and ones we never anticipated." To punctuate this point, an arrow tipped with a strange, sticky substance that ignited on impact sailed through the window. The ensuing chaos made it clear that even the most advanced fire suppression systems struggled against something as simple as Greek fire. "Sir," the intelligence officer continued, ducking behind a console for cover, "humans don't just adapt to combat, they thrive in it. They make everything into a weapon, their environment, their tools, even their culture. Did you know they have something called paintball? It's a game where they simulate battle for fun." Zier's mandibles clicked in growing distress. A distant explosion, followed by the unmistakable twang of a catapult, echoed through the command center. Somewhere, humans were resurrecting medieval siege weaponry. "Send word to all units," Zier ordered sharply. "Conduct full sensor sweeps for human activity, no matter how basic it looks, and figure out why our motion detectors aren't picking up those pre-industrial beasts. I need to know how they're using horses to outmaneuver our hover tanks." Another explosion rattled the building, and this time, the intelligence officer caught the distinctive scent of black powder. Somewhere, humans were manufacturing gunpowder from scratch. "Perhaps," he offered hesitantly, "we should have studied their history more closely before disabling their technology." Zier should have known better. The signs had been all around him. The quiet forests, the lack of any real resistance, the eerily well-maintained trail leading to what his tactical display had flagged as an abandoned human military base. But as the humans would say, pride goes before the fall. "Forward," Zier barked, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "This primitive resistance ends today. We'll show them what true warriors are capable of." The first trap was almost laughable in its simplicity. A net. Not an energy net, not a gravity well, just a plain, old net made of reinforced rope, probably from the base's climbing equipment. It ensnared 3 of his soldiers, hoisting them into the air with nothing but counterweights and pulleys. "Scatter!" Zaketh shouted, but it was too late. From somewhere in the trees, Lieutenant Chenk's voice rang out, "Welcome to basic training, bugs. Today's lesson, Human Warfare 101. The forest exploded into chaos. Glass bottles filled with burning liquid shattered against Dread armor, spreading the flaming fuel that the aliens' environmental suits couldn't handle. These suits, built to withstand the vacuum of space, were now cooking their occupants alive. "Impossible!" one soldier shrieked, desperately trying to put out the fire. "Their weapons are disabled." "We verified," Zaketh snapped, his frustration mounting. "Funny thing about Molotov cocktails," Lieutenant Chen's voice cut through the chaos, her tone light but laced with deadly intent. "They were invented because humans couldn't afford tanks. Sometimes, the best solutions don't need any batteries." Zaketh watched in disbelief as his elite unit crumbled before his eyes. Their high-tech targeting systems, designed to track advanced energy weapons and high-speed projectiles, were utterly useless against simple tripwires and falling logs. Every piece of their superior technology was being outmaneuvered by tactics as old as warfare itself. Section 3, report. He barked into his communicator, but all he got in response was static. Section 4, anyone have eyes on them? A human soldier suddenly emerged from behind a tree, casually holding up a handful of communication devices, clearly stripped from fallen Drade soldiers. He was camouflaged in a ghillie suit made of local vegetation. Their bioscanners must have mistaken him for just another part of the forest. The trap had been perfectly set. Chen's Marines had surrounded them, blending seamlessly into the environment, making them invisible to Drade technology. The humans weren't hiding from their tech. They were using the planet itself to stay hidden. Close combat, Zaketh ordered, rallying his remaining troops. They can't match our natural strength. That was the mistake that would cost him everything. Lieutenant Chen emerged from the underbrush with a predator's grace, moving fluidly in a way their combat systems couldn't even begin to anticipate. The first Drade soldier lunged at her with his primary arms in a textbook combat maneuver, one that their academy had drilled into them. She effortlessly sidestepped, using his own momentum to throw him off balance. In the blink of an eye, she was behind him, applying pressure to joints that Drade armor had never considered vulnerable. Fun fact, she grunted as the alien exoskeleton cracked. Humans have been taking down bigger opponents since we lived in caves. We call it leverage. Physics doesn't care about your tech level. The remaining Drade soldiers watched in shock as their comrades were systematically dismantled by the humans' brutal efficiency. One soldier was sent flying with a judo throw that used his own anti-gravity stabilizers against him. Another discovered the hard way that capoeira was more than just a dance when a kick bypassed his shield harmonics, a move that didn't even register as a weapon. Fall back, Zaketh shouted, genuine fear creeping into his voice. Regroup at the... He never finished the order. Something small and fast. He later learned it was called a molatang, wrapped around his legs, and he was sent crashing to the ground. From his prone position, he could see his remaining soldiers being methodically neutralized by humans who wielded fighting techniques that predated written history. Command! He screamed into his emergency beacon, panic rising. The humans, they're not fighting fair. The response from command was just as frantic. Similar reports were flooding in from all across the planet. In the Arabian desert, Bedouin fighters were using age-old hunting tactics to ambush Drade patrols, while in the Arctic, Inuit warriors emerged from ice tunnels undetected by the Drade's advanced sensors. Across the globe, ancient combat methods, long preserved, were now proving to be unexpectedly relevant. Lieutenant Chun approached the fallen commander, twirling what seemed to be a simple metal staff. You know what your biggest mistake was? She asked casually. You assumed that because we had advanced weapons, we'd forgotten our old ones. But here's the thing, humans don't forget how to fight. We just add new methods to our arsenal. The remaining Drade soldiers, though still capable of movement, were retreating in chaos. Their advanced weaponry, designed for modern warfare, was proving utterly ineffective against humans who refused to fight according to the expected rules. Command! Zaketh weakly transmitted, watching in disbelief as his elite unit scrambled in retreat from humans armed with nothing more than basic tools. We may have made a severe miscalculation. Chun knelt beside him, her gaze almost sympathetic. Here's the thing about humans and warfare, she said, as her Marines efficiently gathered up alien weapons and communication devices. We're not good at it because of our technology. We're good at it because we'll use anything that works. Right now, your fancy tech isn't working. Guess what that leaves us with? She gestured toward the forest around them, where her soldiers were already repurposing fallen Drade armor, using the alien metal to forge new weapons. 5,000 years of combat experience, she continued, and you just gave us the perfect reason to dust off all our old tricks. Congratulations. You didn't disable our weapons. You just reminded us that anything can be a weapon. Back in Commander Year's command center, chaos reigned. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly absurd reports from the ground forces. Base 7 under attack by humans riding four-legged beasts. They're using sharpened sticks. Our targeting systems are failing. Another transmission was lost. Sector 12 is under attack. Rocks, heated rocks, and a device called a trebuchet. Isla's antennae twitched in frustration as she processed the incoming disaster reports. How? She demanded from her officers. How are we losing to a species that thinks hitting things with sharpened metal is advanced combat? A junior officer cleared his throat nervously. Commander, you might want to see this. The main screen switched to footage from what had been their most fortified position in the region, Mongolia. A wave of mounted warriors, actual living creatures with humans on their backs, was overwhelming the Drade defenses. Their advanced shield generators, calibrated to stop energy blasts and high-speed projectiles, proved utterly useless against the simple physics of 1,000 pounds of horse and human colliding colliding at full speed. "Those primitive mammals are bypassing our shield harmonics," screamed the base commander. "They're not registering as weapons. They're just charging at us. Hard, really hard." The transmission abruptly cut off as a cavalry charge crushed through their command post. From the American continent, another distress call, an officer reported. "They've developed projectile weapons that don't require power. They're using something called compound bows. It's just wood and string, but they're penetrating our armor joints. How are they aiming without targeting computers?" "Status update," Ola demanded, her voice laced with anxiety. Her intelligence officer's carapace was noticeably dulled with stress. "We've lost 30% of our ground forces. The humans, they're not fighting like a proper civilization. They're using tactics from every era of their history at once. We're encountering techniques from every stage of their development." The tactical displays flickered, showing the grim evidence. In Europe, humans had reconstructed medieval siege engines. The Drade armor, designed to withstand energy weaponry, was shockingly vulnerable to rocks hurled with massive force from these ancient machines. In South America, forces reported heavy casualties from something called blow darts. An officer just reported that they're using neurotoxins from local plants, one officer said. "Our medical database doesn't even recognize these poisons," Ola continued, her voice tinged with disbelief. "In what had been our secure landing zones, humans have somehow constructed a forge. They're melting down our captured armor and turning it into low-tech, yet devastatingly effective weapons. The irony of being stabbed with swords made from our own advanced alloys is not lost on anyone. Commander," the intelligence chief continued, "we're detecting large human movements in what they call Britain. They've rebuilt something called a longbow core." The tactical display revealed thousands of arrows, tips crafted from salvaged alien tech, filling the sky. The simple projectiles effortlessly slipped through energy shields calibrated for much faster-moving objects, finding the vulnerable joints and seams in the Drade armor. "The humans in the Arctic are using weapons made of frozen water," another officer reported, mandibles clicking in disbelief. "Frozen water, shaped into points, and they're hunting our patrols using techniques they've developed for tracking seals." Isla watched as another Drade base went dark. The humans had somehow weaponized local insect populations against them. The Drade, who were naturally armored against most threats, found themselves helpless against Earth's tiny but lethal warriors. "Who could have known that creatures called fire ants could infiltrate sealed combat armor?" one officer remarked, baffled. "They're using our own technology against us," the intelligence chief noted with a mix of horror and fascination. "Look at this." The display switched to humans in the Middle East, using salvaged anti-gravity units to make camels fly. The Drade combat systems, faced with aerial cavalry charging at them, armed with traditional Bedouin swords, could do nothing but crash. "New updates from the Asian continent," an officer called out, bracing for the next wave of unprecedented tactics. They're killing our soldiers with sticks, just sticks, but they're hitting us with incredible precision. And those aren't just sticks," a cultural expert they had stationed on board interjected. "Those are ancient martial arts weapons. They've been refining these techniques for thousands of years." The room fell silent as footage played, showing a human martial artist systematically disabling a Drade combat robot with nothing but 2 wooden sticks. "Commander," the intelligence officer said quietly, "I think we made a critical mistake when we disabled their advanced technology. We thought we were weakening them, but instead, Year watched another base fall, this time to humans armed with improvised fire charges. We forced them to revert to combat methods they've perfected since the beginning of their existence." An alert flashed across the screen from the Pacific. "Humans have remembered how to build Greek fire. The flames are visible from space. It gets worse," the cultural expert added. "They're teaching each other various human cultures. They're swapping combat techniques, combining them. The last attack? It combined Asian martial arts, Native American stealth tactics, and European metallurgy. They're evolving on the fly." To reinforce this, another report came through, humans in Africa using captured Drade anti-gravity tech to augment their traditional spear-throwing skills. The results were chaotic, to say the least. Year's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Send word to all units. Full retreat." Someone explained to High Command how we lost to creatures who use big rocks as a legitimate strategy. Actually, the cultural expert countered, they have 37 different traditional methods just for using rocks as weapons. And that's not even including the new ones they're creating right now. Lieutenant Chun found Zaketh exactly where she anticipated, in the command bunker of Fort Bradley, surrounded by flickering displays that showed the complete collapse of the Drade forces. He had discarded his damaged armor, revealing his natural exoskeleton. "Come to finish this, human?" he chittered, mandibles clicking in what might have been either defeat or amusement. amusement. Actually, Chun said, spinning her staff, now enhanced with parts of Drade tech, I came to thank you. Thank me. Zaketh blinked, clearly confused. You reminded us of something crucial, Chun replied, stepping into a fighting stance that appeared deceptively relaxed. Humans got lazy, relying on fancy gadgets. You made us remember what we're truly capable of. Zaketh leapt at her, moving with blinding speed. His natural weapons, honed over millennia, sliced the air. Chun flowed around his attack like water, her staff, a perfect blend of ancient design and alien technology, cracking against his armor. We're not warriors because of our weapons, Chun said, ducking under a deadly strike. We're warriors because we turn everything into a weapon. The battle unfolded like a fierce dance, the evolutionary prowess of the Drade versus the unmatched adaptability of humans. Zaketh's armored form clashed with centuries of human combat expertise. Every time he thought he had her figured out, Chun changed tactics. Kung Fu flowed into Judo, then shifted seamlessly into Krav Maga. Impossible, Zaketh exclaimed after she once again used his own momentum against him. Your species, you fight like. We fought everything, Chun replied, sweeping his legs from under him. That's because we have. The remaining Drade vessels began their retreat from orbit, their tactical computers overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human fighting styles. Humans had turned their own technology against them, and the Drade's advanced algorithms couldn't keep up. You know what your real mistake was? Chun asked, watching Zaketh struggle to rise. You thought disabling our technology would weaken us. Instead, you forced us to remember every method of combat we've ever learned. 5,000 years of combat evolution, all at once. Zaketh looked at her, his mandibles flickering in what seemed like reluctant comprehension. You're not just adaptable, he said, realization dawning. You're collectors of combat techniques. Bingo, Chun said, offering her hand to help him up, an action that seemed to baffle his cultural understanding. Now, do you want to surrender properly? Or should I show you what happens when you combine Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with captured anti-gravity tech? Through the command center's viewport, they could see humans riding horseback, pursuing the retreating Drade forces while wielding energy-enhanced medieval weapons. Perhaps, Zaketh conceded, accepting her help, we should have studied your history before attempting this invasion. Probably, Chun replied, a cheerful grin spreading across her face. Official report to Drade High Command. Classification. Top secret rear invasion attempt status. Complete failure species classification update. Humans have been reclassified from Type 2 developing civilization to Omega level threat. Do not engage. Summary of findings. The initial assessment of human military capabilities was fundamentally flawed. While their technology is rudimentary, their combat effectiveness is unprecedented. Humans have an extraordinary ability to adapt, making them formidable in warfare. They see military defeat as a chance to learn and improve. Notable observations. Humans are reverse engineering our anti-gravity technology to enhance their martial arts skills. They're forging weapons from our advanced alloys using medieval techniques. Humans are teaching each other combat methods from throughout their history. Abandoned Drade bases are being converted into museums and training grounds. Recommendations. 1. Immediate establishment of a quarantine zone around the Sol system. 2. Warning beacons to be deployed at all approach vectors. 3. All combat protocols regarding primitive species to be revised. 4. Mandatory study of human military history for all tactical officers. Final note, in perhaps the greatest irony, by disabling their technology, we forced humanity to show why they never needed it in the first place. As one human commander said, thanks for the remedial course in our own history. We needed that. Warning to all species, do not attempt to invade Earth. Their lack of advanced technology is not a weakness, it is merely their backup.